Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the MSL 411 podcast. As you can tell, we have a special guest with us here today. Mary, you haven't been on the podcast before, so I guess you need to introduce yourself. Will you tell our listeners a little bit about your role within SEMbio and your experience in the MSL recruiting world?
Sure. So Mary Morton, I'm one of the founders of SEMbio, which is 16 years old this year, old enough to drive. And I've been in recruiting almost 30 years, and specifically in MSLs for 25.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you are the perfect person then to kick off what we're going to be talking about today, the topic of offers and counteroffers.
Okay.
We have kind of touched on it here and there through various episodes, but we wanted to bring on somebody who has lots of experience, decades of experience with MSL offers to talk about this topic.
All right. So we'll start by kicking off a first question. You've seen probably more offers than anybody here combined. So what are some of the most common questions that you hear being kicked around about MSL offers, any kind of offers in field medical affairs?
Well, I'll hear, how long do I have to make a decision?
Mm-hmm.
And is this the final offer? Which sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And is there any room to negotiate?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one.
I don't know. What do you guys hear? You do the same thing.
Well, I think you hit on one that I wanted to ask you about, because when we have a candidate that we're walking through the interview process, or maybe it's a candidate I've known a long time, they're interviewing with a company outside of us, and they're just calling me for advice. They really want to know about the timeline of everything, and we see kind of different things there. So what would you say to someone who knows that they're going to be getting an offer? How should they adequately prepare themselves? Should they accept that offer on the spot? What are some of the implications if they don't?
That's a great question. Hopefully when somebody's kind of at this stage, they've already thought about the what ifs.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think like if you're going house hunting or car shopping, you hopefully have already worked through all the scenarios in your head. If it's this, then it's a yes. And if it's this, then it's a no. And, where all of the middle ground is. I think it depends on like what the offer comes out at too. If the candidate's really excited about the job and the offer is what they want, I think there's no negatives to accepting on the spot, because you're showing the person who wants to hire you how excited you are and how impressed and pleased you are with the offer. If for some reason the offer comes out at something that is below what you kind of internally had decided you wanted to take, or is less than what you're currently making, if it's a job you really still want, I think your best response is, thank you for the offer. Can I have a little bit of time to think it over? And then if you're going through a recruiter, have a discussion with the recruiter about what's the best route to go from there. And sometimes it's hard to know whether a company's kind of MO is to always make an offer expecting there's going to be a back and forth.
Yeah.
Hopefully if you're going through a recruiter, we already kind of know what their MO is, and we can kind of prepare you that this is going to be their best and final, and there won't likely be any room for negotiation.
Yeah. And you make a great point too on if you like the offer, you're happy with it, you're excited, go ahead and accept on the spot. And I would say the other side of it is if you do go into negotiating and you negotiate for, a higher base salary, to be prepared at that point to take the offer. Don't be negotiating just to kick tires and buy a little time. Things like that, I think, are where candidates can kind of develop a reputation. And that's where you get into tricky territory. So if you do decide that you are going to negotiate that offer and you get what you asked for, you should be prepared at that point to go ahead and accept that offer, have all your questions answered, and be ready to jump in fully and not be kind of kicking tires at that point, because it shows a lack of interest and things can go sideways from that point.
No, I agree. As a recruiter, we're the middle person, right? And so we want both sides to be really happy with whatever the outcome is. And if a candidate gets an offer and they're like, this is not what we agreed that I would accept, our job is to try to go back and renegotiate in good faith. And in good faith being the operative phrase there, I don't want to go back and specifically ask a company, can you please raise the offer to this, unless I can follow that up with, they have assured me they will accept if you can come to this. Anything below that is a maybe or possibly a no. And if they do come back and raise the offer to that, whatever number is, if the person doesn't accept, people don't forget.
So with candidates who maybe take a little while or come back and ask for something else, or those kind of special situations, is it reasonable for them to have a fear of the offer being rescinded or taken away? And do you have examples where that's happened before? Have you seen that?
Well, I can think of some specific scenarios where I have seen candidates get their offers rescinded. But in complete transparency, I've never seen anybody have an offer be rescinded for a reasonable ask.
Yeah.
And also their decorum or their professionalism when they are making a certain request. Because obviously the company wants them, they made them an offer. But if somebody has been given an offer for 200 and the person's like, I won't accept for less than 220, that's a big gap. And so something has fallen apart in the middle. But some of the things that people have requested where their offers have been rescinded, the way that they've requested that additional whatever didn't feel genuine. It felt greedy when the company hadn't lowballed them in the first place. And it was fair based on what's going on out in the world. And it seemed to the clients like this was not about the opportunity to be a part of the family and participate. It was more about what's the most I can drill out of these people. And I think, to use your phrase, it leaves a bad taste in somebody's mouth. How are they going to be excited about that person to come to work for them?
Yeah. And how do you come back from that kind of strange interaction that you've had now where, you guys come to an agreement, you accept their offer, you come on board, now you've had this kind of icky situation, and that's the last taste that they were left before you come on board. That's kind of a strange situation to walk into on your first day of work. And, these companies, and I believe this wholeheartedly with all of the clients that we work for, they care so much about the candidates that they bring on board, and they care about the dynamics of their team. And they really are very thoughtful and mindful when they do extend these offers, and feel really connected to the candidates. And so, how you handle that, whether you are accepting or maybe you are turning the offer down and you are going in a different direction, how you handle that interaction is so important, because the fact that they extended an offer to you was their way of inviting you into their little family. They're what I love about all the rare disease clients and the different clients that we work with is there's such a group of people who are so passionate, and they are interviewing and looking for somebody who shares that passion. And when they kind of invite you into their little family and you reject them or turn them away, it can feel a little bit personal, and you just never know where you're going to run into that person again later in your career. And so how you handle it, like you were saying, Mary, how you finesse that relationship if you are negotiating or whatever the situation is so important. And you always want to think about the long-term ramifications.
Yeah. I always kind of look at it. I say this to a lot of people. I call it's like a courtship. And, every step of the process is as important as the step before or the step after. And so even though you can have this most amazing date, I know I do the dating analogies.
We do.
If the very last interaction of the date was yucky, I think was the word you used, which I think is a good one. What you remember about the date is the yucky part.
Absolutely.
And if you run into that guy at the mall, do people say at the mall? At the grocery store, at the H-E-B, you're probably going to turn around and go the other way.
Yeah. And I think we tell our candidates all the time that the companies we work for, especially, they put their best foot forward. They're not trying to lowball or, get you at a discount. They're going to make an offer that's going to put their best foot forward. And I think that's the importance of working with a recruiter who knows their clients, knows the industry really well, because they can steer those conversations beforehand, make sure the number that the company offers you is something you've discussed, you've discussed in every conversation. And so it is going to be the most attractive offer that company can put forward. Now, sometimes there may be room for reasonable asks, like you said, but yeah, I think if somebody comes out and makes that unreasonable ask, it just dampens the excitement of them inviting you into the family. And it does put that bad taste. And I agree. I think it would be kind of awkward to go to work after you've kind of done this big ask and it's something that was, kind of came out of left field for them.
Yeah. And I want to push in a little bit on something you just said, which I guess is not really the topic of our discussion, but I want you guys out there who are looking for a recruiter who you're going to work with, think about this, because what Linda just said is very important. If your recruiter knows the company that they're going to be representing you to, how well do they know the company, will tell you how well they're going to be able to represent you to that company. So just, this is all about your careers and making sure you're in the best hands. So, and if we don't know the client that we're working with well enough that you don't feel like we can represent you properly, I don't think that would ever happen, but
that's an important that drew me to SEMbio is being so niched in the MSL world allows us to speak from a perspective of experience, and we live, breathe, sleep MSLs. We know them better than anybody because that's all we do. And that's also why our talent acquisition partners, why our folks on the HR side of things rely so much on the information that we're giving them, because we're on the ground with the MSLs every day, talking to them all across the country, all different kinds of companies. And that HR representative, that talent acquisition person is juggling a lot on their plate, first of all, but also not just MSL roles, not just the MSL market like we are. And so it's a symbiotic relationship where we're working together. And I think that's one of the things that initially really drew me to SEMbio.
And also being so niched, like you said, when we have those interviews and somebody says, oh, my interview's at this company or with this person, among all of us here on the team and the years that we've had in industry, somebody knows that person. Somebody's had conversations with that person and we know about them. We know, we can kind of give some insight of like, okay, this is their personality and you're going to hit it off really well with them because you both like this. And so I think, it does help that we deal day in and day out. We eat, sleep, and breathe, like you said, the MSL role and medical affairs, and kind of getting off topic there, but definitely think it's worth mentioning.
Yes.
I want to kind of switch gears. So let's talk about, you've got the offer. It's something you're happy with. You've accepted it. And now your company Counteroffers, the company that you're at, Counteroffers. What are your thoughts on Counteroffers? That's a loaded question, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, to be fair, I think not every counteroffer is a bad idea. Because I think sometimes the onus has to be on the employee. Did I make my needs and desires known to my boss, my manager? And if you go in to resign and they're like, I didn't know you felt that way, or why didn't you tell me? And then they counteroffer them, and but that's not the usual case. The usual case is, holy crap, I can't lose this person. We're in the middle of a launch. What am I going to do now? And, sometimes the manager's going to scramble and freak out that they're about to lose a top performer. In some cases, even a mid-performer, because they just don't want to have to refill them. I think going back in the process, candidates really need to have an open discussion with their boss. If there is something in your situation that is making you want to leave where you are, or is making other positions more attractive to you because you don't have certain job responsibilities or aspects in your job or challenges, I think you need to talk to your boss before you go down that road, and you're wasting your time as well as the company's that's interviewing. But I think you owe it to yourself. What I think happens, though, a lot of times is candidates they're uncomfortable kind of putting that in front of their boss until they've already got an offer somewhere else. And I think your boss would probably much more appreciate it if you let them know, I'm unhappy about these things, or I need more of this. But in most cases, I think taking a counteroffer is not a good idea. It becomes emotional at the end of the process, right? So you knew all the reasons you wanted to leave, and maybe it wasn't because you hated your job. There were some things that just can't be fixed, because there are things you want to do in your career that you just can't do where you are. So, and you find this perfect job or semi-perfect, and it's got all the things you want to do. And but that's, once the offer comes out, that's when it becomes an emotional decision. I don't want to leave my family. I don't want to leave this boss who's nurtured me. Even though if I take this counteroffer, nothing is going to change but my salary. Because the things that were missing and the challenges you needed in your career, none of that will have changed. And that's why I don't know what the current statistic is, but it's a big one, that people who accept a counteroffer, by and large, in a year's time or less, are looking again. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're like, well, I'm kind of stuck like Chuck now because I made the commitment to stay after my boss went to them and got me a counteroffer to stay. But I think we have to remember that people don't really leave for money, or they don't choose to leave. They don't make the decision to look because of money. They make the decision to look for another job because of something else. And then the counteroffer makes them stay, and the money wasn't the reason to begin with that they were looking.
That's a great point, especially in our industry. I don't think I've found really that MSLs are generally money motivated. It's opportunity, it's science, it's different things that are drawing them to one position or another. So you have to really ask yourself, why is money now the thing that is causing you to question your own decision that you've been kind of nursing in that company that you've been courting, to use your word, for so many weeks or maybe months now? Why is it that money is kind of putting the blinders on a little bit? So that's a great point.
And it may not always be money that they offer in the counteroffer. I know that's usually what we see, but it could be title increase sometimes, and
more
like
often than not, though, it's the promise of a title increase.
Exactly.
A promise of a promotion. And it doesn't happen that often. One of my mentors, Barbara Bruno, used to always say, accepting a counteroffer is like remarrying your ex. It's tough.
It's a good analogy, though.
That is a great analogy. And, who knows? Let's say you do accept a counteroffer, foolishly, and you give it 6 months, a year, you don't see the improvement or the change that you were promised. Those promises aren't fulfilled, and you are now back on the job market. Are you in the same job market you were in before? Are you able to find that same kind of company that really got you excited, that was maybe offering that ground floor opportunity? Are you going to be able to find those same things that you already had in that offer that you had lined up? Maybe not. Especially if you're looking for something super specific, super niche, you just don't know that that's going to be the case. And so you're taking a big risk on a company that's already proven themselves to you in the 3-4 years that you've been there. And now you've got their, feet to the fire, forcing them into a decision that they didn't want to make anyway. Do you really want to work and be in that environment where your manager is maybe in the back of their head saying, okay, well, however long they stay is just giving me the opportunity to maybe find their replacement, because they're probably going to end up leaving anyway. So, just things I think to keep in mind if you're considering that. And we would love to talk to you guys about that if you're facing that situation and need some coaching through that for a position that you might be interviewing for at the moment. We're happy to provide some insight and perspective. I know it's hard to think through these things, but like we talked about, money is usually not the motivator here. And so really taking that time to think about, what it was that drew you away and made you open to looking at that new opportunity. What was that first love that caught your interest? So
I think that's a great point. I mean, I think you guys need to stop and consider that if you are in this process right now, of ask yourself, why did I start down this road? And on the subject of counteroffer, because we use an example of, if somebody gets a few months down the road, did that promise of a promotion or whatever come? I mean, these are not just like random examples we're just making up. This happens. And I have someone that turned down a job, took a counteroffer with his company. And I'm actually, when this airs, I'm going to tell him to watch this. I'm saying, I'm talking about you. He took a counteroffer with a promise of a promotion from a top 10 pharma or biotech. And it didn't come. And you know what's funny is the company he turned the offer down with is the company I ended up placing him with when he interviewed the second time. And they gave him a second chance.
When he came to his senses.
Yes. And guess what? He came on as a senior MSL and they promoted him to a field director within a year.
Wow.
So they took him back and they gave him the promotion he deserved at the other company. And he's a great dude. So
that's fantastic. Yes. You love stories like that.
I know.
Yeah, it's a real story.
Yeah. Well, we've covered different elements of the offer. There's the offer itself, and then, going in for that resignation, maybe facing a counter offer situation. The last element of offers that I wanted to talk about is something we get a lot of questions about. It kind of ebbs and flows, I think, over the years. Like, we hear different things at different points and different seasons that the market is moving. And one of those is on the topic of sign-on bonuses.
Okay.
Some people kind of mistakenly assume that sign-ons are a standard part of the MSL salary package because maybe they know someone who got one, or they maybe received one in the past, but they are not standard by any means. And we sometimes need to educate our candidates on that. So, Mary, when do we most commonly see sign-on bonuses? Set the record straight for us.
In the last quarter of the year. Is when for like an annual bonus offset in the last quarter of the year. So if you're interviewing somewhere and you're requesting them to try to offset the bonus you've earned so far this year, I would not expect to see that anytime before October. But for the other side of a sign-on bonus, it's going to be around equity that you may be leaving behind. And that would be like all year round, depending on vesting. And so most companies are going to do their best to attempt to offset whatever you maybe miss the vesting for in the coming year. And the reason for that is that most every company is going to offer some sort of equity or a long-term incentive that you'll have to wait 1 year for vesting. So they want to take care of you for the year you'll have to wait for anything of theirs vesting. So they can try to help you there. And then you'll start vesting in their long-term incentive, whatever it is, the following year. I think it's fair to say that very few companies are able to offset 100% of even that 1 year. Some people could be leaving, 6 figures worth behind. And that's a lot of money. I mean, there are a few companies that could probably do that, but not all. And I would also say that there are some smaller companies pre-revenue that can't give any sign-ons. So I think we have to know that up front. One of the things, and I don't know if you're going to ask this, but I'm going to throw it in anyway. I talked to somebody recently who was unemployed and said, well, what about the sign-on? So I think it's important to note that companies just don't willingly give sign-ons. The point of it is to offset, compensation that you're going to have to leave on the table to make the job change. So they don't just give a sign-on for the heck of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of it as like the bow on the gift that is your compensation package. It's just the little pretty decoration on top to make it a little bit more enticing. And I really think that's a pretty common misconception. And so I appreciate having the
that friend that they might have heard of who got a $15,000 sign-on bonus and is, sharing the details of the offer they got at such and such company is probably not giving you the nitty-gritty details on, well, that $15K sign-on bonus was to offset the portion of their bonus that they're leaving behind, or some of the equity that hasn't vested yet. They're probably not getting into the nitty gritty on what the sign on was for. So in that scenario where you hear that friend that got that one thing, maybe do a little bit more digging or take it with a grain of salt, because like Mary said, there's not a lot of companies out there just giving out free money.
I'd be in line.
We would all be in line for that. But this is, I think, an important piece, as we head into Q4 coming up here, and it's about that time of year. With the equity piece, or with the sign-on piece, the other thing to take into consideration when you are looking at what you would be leaving on the table is the time of year it is too. If you are somebody who gets your bonus in the March timeframe, which I would say most companies do, and you are interviewing in the early part of that year, that company may not have the ability to do a sign-on, but might say, hey, let's do an extended start date. That could be the case too.
Point.
There are different ways that they can get creative on that front. So don't feel like you necessarily need to wait until that March timeframe to look for something new. There are ways that we can get creative. It's not all black and white in that department, but just be really open with your recruiter, let them know what you're leaving on the table. I think what we hear very commonly from our clients is that, they thought they found the perfect candidate. They had the offer all lined up, and then, oh, surprise, here at the end, they've got $100,000 worth of equity that they're not willing to walk away from. And the companies find themselves in kind of an icky situation because there wasn't necessarily somebody like us that is talking to these candidates about that stuff from the very beginning.
And that's totally fair. If somebody doesn't want to leave $100,000 on the table, I would not have a problem with that. But it's better for us to know at the beginning. So we can save everybody some time. I mean, it's not like $25,000, which, maybe the candidate does such an incredible job that the company's like, yeah, whatever you need, 25,000, 50,000, whatever. But yeah, $100,000 is
it's a lot of money. And, I think we hear from candidates a lot of times that they don't really understand how their benefits work at their company. So that's something that we oftentimes end up guiding them through too, where they think they have this certain amount of money that's on the table. They've got the golden handcuffs, as we like to say. But then when we do a deeper dive, they realize, oh, it's actually a lot less than I thought it was, or, it's not vesting for quite a long time, and it's not really even in play if you consider the LTI package that I'd be getting at this new company anyway, or maybe their stock is underwater because their stock took a nosedive, their product failed, or whatever the case.
That's probably another podcast topic. For people, to make sure everybody understands how their stock options work.
Yeah, and every company does it, a little bit differently. The portals that the candidates can see look a little bit different, and so if you feel like you've got the golden handcuffs, but you don't really understand even what you're looking at, that's something that we can help a lot of times to navigate as well. So my last question, Mary, is a little bit of a hot one for you. Where have you seen bad advice from a well-meaning friend go horribly wrong at the offer stage, and what should candidates be cautioned?
Try not to be too specific here.
The names have been redacted for their protection.
Yes. Well, I've seen people be recommended to counteroffer, or not counteroffer, but like counter the offer and the negotiation. And it really oftentimes is that friend and the well-meaning friends, like you and I graduated from pharmacy school at the same time, and my company that I just went to just offered me this, and this is how I negotiated it. So just try it. You should do that. But maybe that other person was like Superman and just really did such an amazing job, because when it comes down to the negotiation, I tell people this all the time. That's not, there's only so much I can do if you don't do your part. But yeah, well, I got this. Well, I mean, it's apples and oranges. Everybody's not like the same apple. So yeah, I've actually been on the phone with a candidate whose spouse was standing right next to the candidate. I know you know who I'm talking about, because it was one of our deals that we did, and the candidate's spouse was telling the spouse what to say and what to ask for. And it's not like we didn't know. It's not like we couldn't hear him. So There was that one. I've heard lots. I've heard.
Well, and
I'm trying to be so careful because I want to go back to some that are really old. So, like, if anybody's watching, they don't know I'm talking about them. But there was the parking garage thing. They wanted this $1,000 a month car allowance, and then they also wanted another like $600 a month for their parking garage expense.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anybody that gives a $1,600 a month car allowance, and it was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
which is why we bring up all these things on the front end to really
Yes.
make sure that candidates understand what they need, what makes sense for them, given their personal preferences and their needs, and hopefully save everybody some headaches at the end for this reason.
We always try to be straight shooters with our candidates, whereas your friend might be embellishing to say how well they negotiated when really it maybe more fell into their lap, or they had different experience or background that led to that, or they were a better personality fit at that company, and whatever the case may be. So
from candidate to candidate, we have, I think, such a knowledge base of what an MSL role looks like at different companies that other people don't have that same background information because they don't talk to MSLs from that company all the time. So I can look at one company and I can say, you know what, that company pays their MSLs super well, but they have a ton more travel. Their metrics are way higher. They're spending way more time out in the field. The expectations on that MSL are a lot different than such and such other company over there, where they have maybe more of a reputation for better work-life balance.
Yeah, like break that down to a per hour rate.
Right. Then things might start to even out a little bit.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
That well-meaning friend is looking at MSL position versus MSL position, but as we know, every position at every company is so different from one to another. Territories are different, products are different, the needs as far as conference attendance, these are all going to be different, even in different parts of the country too. I love talking to MSLs out in Florida when it's conference season, because they're all say the same thing. Just add another conference. What's going on, Ashley? There's just different expectations from role to role, from territory to territory. And so, taking that advice from a friend, you have to take with a grain of salt, because they just aren't privy to all of that information.
So true. I think this has been a really great conversation, Mary. We wish you were in the Frisco office a little bit more so we could have more of these, because we love your insight. If you're listening and you've been in a counteroffer situation, we would love to actually hear about your experience. There is a texting link in the show notes. It's totally anonymous. Feel free to reach out. If you've been in a counteroffer situation, did you take it? Did you regret it? Did you love it? Did it work out great for you? We would love to know. So feel free to drop us a quick line and let us know your experience in the counteroffer situation. Thank you guys for tuning in this week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.